have schizophrenia, and for months I was convinced my sister-in-law was whispering at me to push me over the edge. My wife took her side every time, and the more this continued, the more I began to doubt my own sanity. But before she moved into our home, I had been stable for years. I hadn't heard voices, hadn't felt paranoid, hadn't struggled the way I used to. Everything changed once Nadia walked through the door with her bags and her soft, constant muttering. It started subtly. She would walk past me in the hallway, tilting her head slightly, letting a whisper slip out just low enough for me to catch the sound but not the words. When I would ask what she said, she'd stare at me with wide, concerned eyes and claim she said nothing. The pattern repeated itself over and over again, every whisper, every denial, until I couldn't ignore the timing anymore. The voices only happened when she was near, never before, never otherwise. I tried to rationalize it for months, telling myself I was imagining things, but the pressure kept building. The first breakdown hit me late one night. I lay in bed, tears streaming silently down my face, repeating to myself that it was just her, not me, that I wasn't slipping, that this wasn't the illness coming back. But weeks later, another breakdown came, faster, harder. That's when I finally told my wife, Clara, everything. Her reaction terrified me even more. She didn't look suspicious of Nadia. She didn't look angry. She looked scared for me. She said her sister would never try to harm me, that the whispers weren't real, that it had to be my illness resurfacing. Instead of comforting me, her words made the walls feel like they were closing in. I kept hearing the whispers, soft, quick, deliberately unclear, always from the same direction, and always when Nadia was near. That's when I began watching Nadia more closely than ever. She talked to herself when she cooked. She paused in doorways, staring off as though listening for something only she could hear. She moved her lips without sound sometimes, like she was rehearsing a line. The more I observed her, the more convinced I became that she was doing it on purpose. I tried to capture exact words, but the whispers always dissolved into fragments, unclear and unnerving. Clara saw me withdrawing, skipping conversations, losing sleep, obsessing over tiny details. She grew frustrated, insisting I trust her judgment and my doctors, but I couldn't let it go. Each day was another cycle of whispers, confusion, and hopeless attempts to prove I wasn't imagining things. Even with consistent medication and regular psychiatric appointments, nothing changed. My doctor adjusted my meds multiple times, hopping to dial down what he insisted were hallucinations. Each adjustment gave me a few days of hope that quickly collapsed under the weight of the whispers. Meanwhile, Nadia acted completely normal around Clara, laughing, helping with chores, pretending nothing was wrong. But the moment Clara left the room, her behavior shifted. That's when the whispering always began. I started to believe she was tailoring everything specifically to break me down. Whisper just loud enough for me to hear, deny everything when confronted, let Clara see only her innocent side. The tension between all of us became unbearable. Clara was caught between her husband and her sister. I could see her trying to hold everything together, but my fixation on Nadia's behavior was tearing our home apart. One evening, everything boiled over. I was walking down the hallway when I heard it, a whisper clearer than ever, a sharp, low murmur directly behind me. I whipped around, heart pounding, and stormed into the kitchen, where Nadia stood with a glass of water, pretending not to notice me. I exploded, I yelled. I demanded she admit what she was doing, demanded she explain why. Nadia burst into tears and ran out of the house. I panicked because I knew exactly who she would call. And Clara hated being interrupted at work. I imagined all the lies Nadia could tell her. Clara came home hours later, looking exhausted and overwhelmed. I tried to explain, but she cut me off. She said she loved me, but hearing me accuse her sister of tormenting me was ripping her apart. Behind her, Nadia stood quietly, crying and nodding along to everything Clara said. It felt like watching someone stage a performance just for her benefit, and I couldn't say a word without sounding unhinged. I decided to wait. My emotions were too raw, and Clara wouldn't hear me if I spoke from anger. The next day, calmer, I tried again. I told Clara how deeply the whispers were affecting me. She listened, but in her eyes I could see the conclusion already forming. She said my symptoms were too complex to deal with at home. She said she was considering hospitalization for me. The thought hit me like a punch. It felt like she was giving up. We argued, loud, desperate, painful. Neither of us could convince the other. Afterward, I knew I had to approach this differently. If Clara saw Nadia's strange behavior with her own eyes, without my commentary, maybe she would understand. so I stayed quiet and watched. And whenever Nadia muttered under her breath or froze mid-task, I made sure Clara was nearby. Slowly, her expression began to change. Doubt crept in. That's when I began recording everything. I captured Nadia speaking softly to herself at the sink, pausing mid-conversation with no reason, staring into empty space, moving her lips without sound. Her behavior was bizarre, and I documented every moment. I collected multiple clips, each stranger than the last. Then one night, after a day full of whispers, I went to the bathroom just to breathe and be alone. My phone recorded accidentally on the counter. As soon as I sat down, the whispers began again, persistent, slithering under the doorframe, unmistakable. When they finally stopped and I left the room, I didn't think to check the recording right away. But later, desperate for proof, I listened to the video. And everything changed. I heard the bathroom door creak, then a rising murmur, Nadia's voice, whispering directly outside the door, not a hallucination, not a trick of the mind, her actual voice. My heart thundered as I replayed the clip over and over. There was no mistaking it. This was real. Someone was actively trying to make me think I was losing my mind. With this evidence, I kept recording for several more days. When I finally felt ready, I sat down with Clara and showed her everything. She didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. She watched as Nadia muttered to herself, paused unnaturally, whispered under her breath for no reason. I watched Clara's face turn pale. The tension between us dissolved instantly as she finally understood. We confronted Nadia together. Clara spoke first, gently but firmly, explaining that we had noticed concerning behavior. Nadia's hands shook, her breathing quickened, and when we showed her the recordings, she broke down. Her entire act fell apart. She cried uncontrollably. Her voice cracked as she admitted everything, every whisper, every moment outside the bathroom door, every time she tried to get inside my head. Clara demanded to know why she did it. Nadia hesitated, then confessed that she was afraid of me because of my schizophrenia. She said she had read about dangerous schizophrenics online and convinced herself that I could hurt her someday. Her whispers were an attempt to scare me into getting more intensive treatment or to push me to leave the house. She insisted she did it out of fear, not malice. Clara listened, horrified. Fear wasn't an excuse for cruelty. Nadia had crossed a line far beyond what anyone could excuse. Clara told her she had broken our trust and caused immeasurable damage. Nadia apologized again and again, sobbing, saying she didn't realize how far she was pushing things. She promised to get help, but the damage was already done. Clara and I talked long into the night and decided Nadia couldn't stay with us anymore. The next morning, we asked her to sit with us. Clara explained calmly that her behavior had deeply harmed our lives and that she needed to leave. Nadia's fear turned to desperation, then anger. She accused us of abandoning her, claimed she had nowhere to go, shouted that we were doing to her what her ex-boyfriend once did. But Clara held firm. After a tense argument, Nadia stormed off to pack. Clara helped her in cold silence. When it was time for her to leave, Clara tried to hug her, but Nadia shoved her away. Then she looked at me with an expression that still chills me. She mouthed something I couldn't understand, then slammed the door behind her. The house fell silent. For the first time in months, the silence felt peaceful instead of suffocating. Clara cut off all contact with Nadia, and we focused on rebuilding what had almost been destroyed. And the whispers finally stopped.